Hey fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. What are pro stock rackets? It's a question I often get. Will I play better if I use a pro stock rackets, or they're made from better quality? I would say no, you won't play better. I don't think the quality is such an increase, but overall no, not really. And usually they are just retail rackets given to the pros to be able to be customized to their liking. Maybe they want them slightly longer. Maybe they want a slightly different string pattern. Maybe they want a slightly softer layup, meaning that it has a more flex. And the pros can get that from the manufacturers. In some cases, the manufacturer is very pleasing to the pros. Like in Head's case, they are very good at tweaking the racket to suit a certain player. But for some brands like Bubble and Yonex, you see these kind of older generations of certain rackets, like Osaka using the AI98, Fognini using the Pure Drive Original, and they offering that to the player and with room for customization. So they usually send out the lighter version, where then a customizer or the company itself customizes the racket to suit the specs of the players, as most pros use heavier rackets. There's plenty of silicone, lead tape, and other things involved in making the racket suitable for them. And this is all tailored to the certain player. So it's definitely not easy to just go and buy a Djokovic racket and hope that you're going to play like Novak Djokovic. It's made for him. The grip shape might be different. The weight and balance are customized specifically for his game. So you need to get a racket that you like, and then maybe customize it to your game. And you should have the same approach as a pro in many ways. You don't have to be as picky as the pros because they make a living from tennis. But if you find a retail racket you like, you can definitely want to match that racket so they're all the same. If you buy three, sadly, due to quality control from the manufacturers, we get rackets that are, different in weight, balance, and swing weight. You can use the Tennis Warehouse matching service where you can pick out certain specs that they measure, which is a great service. Use my link in the description below. So that helps. But overall, that's a big benefit of pro stocks, that the pros can actually get matched rackets. They're all matched weight, balance, swing weight. So it's much easier for them. Because if you're buying a racket, get kind of the max of your playing range, like weight, balance, swing weight, and you get some rackets over that spec, it's not going to be possible for you to get the match to your spec. So then I would advise you to buy a lighter racket. Let's say, for example, you're playing with the Headspeed MP. You should maybe buy the Headspeed MP Lite and then customize the rackets to suit your specs. That would be my recommendation if you're not buying pro stocks and you want a matched racket, which I think for pretty much any ambitious player is a good idea. I have a few different pro stocks here to show you differences in pro stocks. One I showed you before, Julia Gerges racket. It's a Pure Drive 2012. It's painted to look differently, which is usually what the pro stock is for. Obviously, they want to sell most recent retail version of the racket, so they paint the pro's racket to look like the most recent one. That's the trick, or whatever you want to call it. That's how they market the racket. So obviously the pros can't keep changing rackets all the time. That would be crazy. So if they have to play with a new racket every 2 years, I don't think it would be very good for their game. I'm playing with new rackets all the time, and that's something I can blame my lack of progress in tennis for. So they usually have some kind of player sticker. Here it says Julia Gerges. Usually it's some kind of code. On head frames you find a code. You might have silicone in the handle if you open up here. And it could be a different model completely. Sometimes you can easily tell, like for example, this Cortex on Fognini's rackets, this is just painted on. Now, not anymore because they changed the technology, but for a long time it was just painted on. Here you can actually feel the Cortex, so it's actually there. You can see these funny tricks where they try to paint the racket to look differently. So that's what they do. Sometimes you have rackets that look exactly like the retail version, but they're just from the pro stock. So here you have a Prestige MP, a racket I really, really like. And I have the retail version, but this one, customized by Ring and Roll, is slightly longer and has a 1619 pattern, which is not available to buy in the store. So you can't buy a 1619 Prestige MP from Head or from Tennis Warehouse. So luckily they could arrange that for me to give it a go and give me a bit more spin potential, a little bit more plow through thanks to the extended length. They also made me a Babolat L2 grip, which is not something I could do on my own. So, but it's the same paint, it's just glossy instead of the matte paint. So that's also a way you can tweak a pro stock or see a pro stock differently from the retail. And then we have this racket, for example. It's another example of a paint job. This is a Burn 100. No, it's not a Burn 100. It's far from 100 square inch, and it's far from a Burn. It's definitely not as thick. Burns are usually quite thick, and it's definitely a more control-oriented string pattern. You see here, it's like 1820 here, if you count the strings. Natural gut mains, all the power crosses, some weight added to the side. So this is a H22 Pro stock, or a Blade Pro, which is the mold they're selling on the Pro Labs page from Wilson. So a completely different racket, more controlled, used by many pros, Hachano, McDonald, there's a few different names there. If you want to know more about the H22 and the Blade Pro, look at my videos, Why Pro Players Love the Blade. That is on this channel. But this, it's another Pro stock. It's definitely more similar to a Blade than a Burn, although some might reason that it's not exactly the same family. I still think it's within the same region of rackets, because there are many similarities here. This one is 1820, this one is 1619. Both come in different string patterns. H22, or the Blade Pro, is thicker, as you can see. This is actually 22 millimeter beam. This is 21, if I'm not mistaken. Wider and thicker, but not that easy to tell just from pictures. You really have to hold them side by side. But yeah, the H22 or the Blade Pro stock, painted to look like a Burn, not even close to a Burn. So that's another example of a pro player racket. So Pro stocks, if you're really picky on the racket you want, if you want a specific string pattern, different layup, like for example, when Andy Murray played with his PT57A, and then he wanted to switch to a bigger head size, he got the Prestige MP Lite 2021, but with a layup of a PT57A. That shows how picky the pros can be, and that if they have a high ranking enough, they can really get what they want and test that. For us, we're going to be fine with most rackets, most retail rackets. If we find a retail we like, we don't need to go for a pro stock, in my opinion. I think we're fine anyway. But like I said, it might be smart if you're a very ambitious player to go for a slightly lower spec to be able to customize them upwards, or use a matching service from Tennis Warehouse, for example, so you get the specs you want. Because of quality control, that is an issue for all brands. You can get very different specs and very different playability from the rackets. So be a bit careful with that. That's one of the benefits of buying pro stock. The issue is usually the price. The price is quite high, so these cost quite a bit of money. And you can probably get equally good playing ability from, just retail rackets. But keep that matching thing in mind, so you get the specs you want. The benefit of pro stocks is that you will know the specs. One big benefit, but no magic involved, just made for the pro player, and specifically that pro player, not for you. So good to keep that in mind. If you want more information about pro stocks, pro player rackets, let me know in the comments below. Check out more of this stuff on patreon.com/tennisnerd, where I talk about helping some pro players and stuff with their racket choices, etc. That's about it for this one. Have a nice day, and don't forget to play some tennis.